too. But much of the south, I suspect, will stay dry, just be fairly drab, misty, murky conditions. But as I said, it is a lot milder than it was this time yesterday. Notice some heavier rain coming into Northern Ireland through this afternoon. That's going to pep up in western Scotland also. Temperature-wise, as I said, we are well up compared to yesterday. Double digits almost across the board, maybe into the teens across South Wales and southwest England. Still pretty cold, though, in the far northeast. The wet weather does pep up, though, later on, and it turns into a very soggy evening across Scotland. The winds will also start to strengthen once more, and there'll be a band of rain whizzing across England and Wales. That'll turn pretty heavy for a time, but it shouldn't last too long, moving through, and then temperatures will fall away later in the night, well down into single figures once more. So a colder feel to Wednesday, a mix of sunshine and showers, so a brighter day with some sunny spells, but most places seeing some showers, particularly northern Scotland, where they will be turning more wintry again with snow down to low levels by the end of tomorrow. Rain showers largely elsewhere, and as I said, there'll be some brighter spells in between, a bit of sunshine, but a cold wind picking up once more, particularly noticeable on western coasts, 5, 6, 7 degrees. Add on that wind, it will feel colder. Thursday will be a cold, but largely fine and sunny day before the potential for more wet weather comes in during Friday and Saturday. So the weather chopping and changing a lot this week.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Good morning, I'm Rosie Wright. Let's get you up to date with the latest headlines. MPs will vote on new COVID restrictions later as measures to combat the Omicron variant are enforced in England. Face coverings are now compulsory in shops and public transport, and all UK arrivals have to self-isolate until they receive a negative PCR result. 9 cases of the new variant have now been identified in Scotland, and that brings the UK total to at least 14. France is proposing what it describes as a balanced agreement between the UK and the EU to try to tackle the migrant crisis. The French government says it's sending a letter to Boris Johnson. If it's received well, they say then talks can resume quickly. Footage has emerged which appears to show the moment a British F-35 stealth jet crashed into the Mediterranean. The incident happened early this month on the UK's flagship carrier HMS Queen Elizabeth. The Ministry of Defence says it's too soon to comment on the cause of the incident. Around 1 million homes and businesses are believed to have been damaged by Storm Arwen. In Scotland, at least 17,000 properties were without power for a fourth night. And across the UK, engineers are working to restore electricity to more than 60,000 homes. Prince Charles has acknowledged the appalling atrocity of slavery in Barbados during a ceremony marking its transition to a republic. The nation's first ever president, Dame Sandra Mason, has now replaced the Queen as head of state. You are now up to date. I'll bring you up to speed again at 10 o'clock. But now, Patrick and Mercy.
Good morning, you're watching To The Point on GBNews with me, Mercy Moroki, and Patrick is back as well. We've got another show full of today's big stories, discussions and opinions, so here's what's coming up.
Yes, well, all adults in the UK will be offered a COVID booster jab to help curb the effects of the new variant, the COVID variant Omicron, and face coverings are, from this morning, mandatory in shops and public transport in England. We'll be speaking with a leading doctor in infectious diseases and putting some questions to him about this new variant.
Yes, and a convicted Albanian people trafficker is set to be deported from the UK for a third time. Just over a year from the last time he was deported, we'll be asking why it's so easy for deported criminals to find their way back into the country.
Yes, and we'll bring you an update on Storm Arwen as its impact continues to be felt across the north, with hundreds of families still without power and road conditions still very dangerous.
Yes, we have all of that coming up and much more as well across the programme, and you can get in touch as usual, GB Views at gbnews.uk. But first, Patrick gives his views on the reintroduction of COVID restrictions by the government.
So, the new Omicron COVID restrictions came into force at 4 a.m. this morning, which is interesting because MPs won't actually get to vote on whether or not they should be made legal until much later this afternoon. It is interesting, isn't it, that the government felt so concerned about this new variant that it was unfathomable that they could have waited just 12 more hours to bring these restrictions in, allowing our politicians to debate them and then vote for whether or not they want to be introduced, like a normal democracy. The measures include mandatory face coverings in shops and on public transport and the return of day 2 PCR tests for anyone who enters the UK from abroad. Travellers returning to the country will be required to self-isolate until they get a negative result, while those who come into contact with someone who tests positive for the Omicron variant will need to self-isolate for 10 days, even if they're fully vaccinated. And that last point is the real kicker for me. This could be a return to the pingdemic, and the pingdemic is worse than the pandemic. New research shows that another pingdemic could cost us £2 billion. It will wrap its tentacles around every single aspect of our society and our economy, and slowly but surely suck the absolute life out of it. We're entering what is supposed to be one of the busiest times of year for retail, the Christmas period. Finally, after a couple of years of suffering, business was looking forward to making hay and hearing the pinging of their tills, not the pinging of their phones. It will mean labour shortages, but more than that. It's almost like a type of psychological warfare. As things stand, we don't really know much about Omicron, aside from the fact that it sounds like a Bond villain. I do find it staggering how much mixed messaging there already is about it, though. The South African scientist who discovered it is saying that it's very mild and we're overreacting. We were initially told that it was called the Botswana variant and it originated in the bodies of people with HIV. That wasn't until Botswana came out and said that the people who tested positive for it were actually travelling to the country and didn't have HIV. I can understand absolutely why the government wants to be cautious. It does look as though Omicron at least has the potential to be very dangerous, and they would be slammed if they didn't take it seriously, especially by the majority of the media, who appear to have some kind of lockdown fetish. These people on incredibly high salaries, who would be exempt from any lockdown measures anyway because they'd be classed as key workers, are urging the government to lock down for the sake of public health, despite the fact that another lockdown would mean longer GP waiting times, catastrophic mental health issues, and people losing their jobs and generally becoming poorer. Just to return to my main point, there are three main problems for me with the new measures. They've been brought in without democratic process, they will cause a pingdemic that will cost us billions, but also it is like psychological warfare. People are already cancelling their Christmas parties while Boris goes maskless to the theatre and drinks wine with his chums. People's holiday plans are once again up in the air. People are now wondering whether or not they'll hug their family at Christmas. In fact, the government was trialling an advertising campaign entitled "Don't Bring COVID Home for Christmas." And that's really where I draw the line. This government and Sage, in my opinion, are deliberately playing roulette with our nation's mental health, and that is unacceptable. Yes, I just want to clarify one thing as well, which is that, look, it does genuinely look as though Omicron at least has that potential to be something dangerous, and there has to be some kind of reaction to it. But I do think that the messaging and the way it's being delivered from the government, I find quite bad for our nation's mental health.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I think I would rather... I wore a face mask this morning, on my route here for the first time in a very, very long time. You know, I don't want to wear a face mask, basically. Let's put it that way. But it's, you know, mandatory, apparently. The government guidelines say I have to. So, fine, I'll do that. But I think you do have to draw a line somewhere. Yeah. And I don't take this line of argument, which when I tweeted this out a couple of days ago, lots of people, and, you know, it's a legitimate opinion, but lots of people were saying, well, if you accept face masks, you will be forced to accept any restriction, and therefore you're capitulating, basically, by even accepting a minor restriction. And that is a view a lot of people have. But for me, we all have different red lines, and just because I decide to put on a face mask, it absolutely does not mean that I would easily accept not being able to see my family at Christmas or whatever. Lots of people have different red lines, and I just don't think, whilst I completely agree with you that mental health, I mean, we've destroyed the nation's mental health, and any further restrictions will destroy the nation's mental health. I think we need to accept people have different risk levels, and people's aversion to risk is different, and they should be allowed to make their own choice.
Well, absolutely, and that point is emphasised by my inbox at the moment. Get in touch, by the way, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Mac has been in touch, saying that he thinks I'm wrong. I would rather the government erred on the side of safety and not listen to the minority, like myself, apparently, who see there's some sort of conspiracy against people's freedom. I don't think it's a conspiracy against people's freedom at all. I think it's bad for our nation's mental health, and sometimes the decisions they make are illogical. That's really my point. But then, of course, there's a lot of people saying that they think I'm right, really, which is that they were saying that, look, vaccines, we've got the vaccines now, whereas, you know, we're as protected as we possibly can be. Yeah. Look, it's a tricky one. Where do you stand on this? Of course, we've got those new rules and regs that have come in. I think one of the main points for me really is the fact that these are able to be brought in before we can actually vote on them. It is a sort of, what happens this evening, which won't happen, by the way, but what happens this evening if our MPs vote against this stuff? What? So anyone who was fined today on the tube or on the train for wearing a mask, for not wearing a mask, what happens? Do they get the receipt?
Yeah, it is a bit haphazard, I think, but that's the nature of all of this. It's evolving and all that. But keep your views coming in, and we'll get to those later as well. But after the break, we'll be discussing those latest updates and restrictions in light of that new variant. And in particular, we're going to be speaking to a doctor about everything we need to know about the virus. In particular, lots of people have got in touch asking how does viruses mutate? How do they know this one is sort of milder than Delta, etc.? So we'll be putting all those questions to a doctor just in a moment.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Now, all adults in the UK will be offered a COVID booster jab to help stop another wave of infections driven by the new variant Omicron. Early evidence suggests the Omicron variant has a higher reinfection risks, but scientists say it will take about 3 weeks before it's known how the variant impacts vaccine effectiveness.
Well, until then, England's Deputy Chief Medical Officer, Professor Jonathan Van Tam, JVT to his mate, says vaccine boosting is the thing we can do most easily while we wait for the science mist to clear. So meanwhile, the government has introduced new self-isolation rules and made face coverings mandatory for visiting shops and using public transport in England as of 4 a.m. this morning.
Yes, well, Dr. Bharat Pankania is a senior clinical lecturer at the University of Exeter Medical School. He has over 20 years' experience in communicable diseases, disease control and infectious disease management, and he joins us now. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Bharat. I just first want to start off by asking you some more technical questions about this virus. So just tell me what we know about this mutation so far.
Yeah, I'm very happy to oblige. So these viruses are what we call RNA viruses. RNA viruses, when they multiply, when they reproduce, they make mistakes because they haven't got a checking system. So this variant, Omicron, has made many, many mistakes in a section of its RNA, which codes for the manufacture of the spike protein. What that means is, because of the many mistakes, read that to mean mutations, its structure will have changed. With the structure changing, its behavior can change. So it may become more infectious, it may become more disease causing, and it may become vaccine immunity bypassing. None of this is confirmed because we've got to do experiments and tests in laboratories to see how the new structure on this new variant is behaving. So those are the things that we are very interested in now because of this many mutations in a critical part of the virus.
What everyone wants to know is, when will we know? When will we find out whether or not Omicron is actually more dangerous than Delta, for example? Because obviously the sooner we can find that out, the sooner we can just crack on and get back to normal, can't we?
Indeed, I agree with you. So what we have to do is these experiments, and these experiments take time because you've got to grow the virus, and growth is not dependent on a factory, so to speak. So you've got to grow it in cells, then you've got to harvest it, and then you've got to expose it to antibodies, and then you've got to see how it behaves. So all that unfortunately takes time, and I estimate in 2 to 3 weeks' time we will know a lot more than we do know today.
And our South African counterparts have said it's quite mild, there's not too much to worry about. They think the restrictions we've placed on travelling between the African subcontinent and Britain are not proportionate. And also a top Australian doctor has said that it could actually be good, as it could kill off what he says is the more lethal Delta variant. What do you make of all of that?
Yes, very happy to answer those questions. So we mustn't extrapolate from the African experience to the European experience, because the population subset in South Africa is different from Europe. We have more older age people. So we don't know. That is the truth. What happens in South Africa does not necessarily mean will also happen in northern countries like United Kingdom, European Union, United States. Now, with respect to what the Australian doctor was saying, I think there may be a translational error. It could be, we just don't know. It could be, for example, that Omicron becomes the dominant virus. That's entirely possible. And it could be that it is mild. In other words, it is not severe disease causing, it's not bypassing vaccines. Happy days. The issue is We just don't know. But we will know. We will know in time. It takes a few weeks for all these.
Oh, well, you know what? It's good timing, actually, because we were about to thank Dr. Bharat anyway. Dr. Bharat Pankanya there. He's a senior clinical lecturer at the University of Exeter Medical School, loads of years of experience, decades of experience in exactly this kind of thing. So hopefully that was slightly educational for you when it comes to the Omicron
yes,
variant.
Indeed. And I think he said 3 weeks is his estimate for when we might know more about this variant in terms of how much more lethal, how much more dangerous it is. Yeah.
And I think that's really important, actually, because I alluded to earlier, there has been some research done by the Institute of Economic Affairs, actually, that said that if there is such thing as a pingdemic that may well happen, it could cost us a couple of billion quid. So the sooner we can find out whether or not, frankly, we need any more restrictions, then the better and the more money we save.
Yes, indeed. Well, Brits who fail to wear a mask in shops and on public transport today and going forward face a maximum fine of £6,400. Yes. Well, but penalties of £200 will be handed to people in England who don't wear a face covering. That's for their first offence, so to speak, and that's under the new government rules, which are, of course, stopping or trying to stop the spread of this Omicron COVID variant.
Well, our GB News North West reporter, Bradley Harris, is live for us this morning at the Bolton Bus Interchange, a big bus station in Greater Manchester. Thank you very much, Bradley. So, look, what's going on there, I suppose?
Yeah, well, here we are again. This is probably a Christmas present that some people really didn't want. Coronavirus measures, such as wearing a face covering, are back in force in places like shops, in supermarkets. If you're going out for your food shop today, expect to see signs saying to wear a face covering. And also here where I am, in public transportation hubs, on buses, trains, trams, you will be expected to wear a face covering. Of course, unless you're exempt, you will be asked to wear one. Here at Bolton Interchange, there have been members of staff walking around with face coverings, offering them out to people for those who don't have one. Of course, many people waking up this morning not realising that they may need one for their onward journey. Also, some other new measures coming into place in secondary schools. Not mandatory, but pupils in secondary schools are being strongly advised to wear face coverings in communal areas. So in canteens, when they're having their lunch, for instance, that's where you'll expect people to be wearing masks there. That guidance does extend to staff and visitors at all schools. This is in England now. Also, if you are travelling to England from another country, expect to do a PCR test within 48 hours. And then you'll have to self-isolate until you get a negative result. Of course, the government are now saying if you are one of those cases, that's part of the Omicron variant, expect to get a call from NHS Test and Trace, who will ask you to self-isolate for 10 days, and that is regardless of whether you've had a vaccine or not. And of course, the big news yesterday on booster jabs, all adults, so that's people aged 18 years old and over, will now be able to get their booster jab, and their second dose of the vaccine is now being offered to 12 to 15-year-olds too. So they're just some of the new measures taking place as of 4 a.m. this morning.
Bradley, thank you very much. Bradley Harris there, hanging out in a bus station up north for us. No one can say you don't put a shift in. Thank you very much, Bradley, there from Bolton Bus Station there, giving you the updates, the latest updates on what Omicron's like on the ground. Anyway.
Yes, indeed. Omicron on the ground sounds like a blockbuster.
Yeah,
movie.
It does actually. It does sound like a film that was never made, a straight-to-DVD movie. Omicron on the ground.
I was getting told off yesterday quite a lot for saying Omicron, which sounds like the cooler
Omicron.
Omicron.
Well, it's mutated.
Yeah, well,
yes.
We shouldn't joke, maybe,
about this potentially deadly new variant?
Yeah,
no. Well, if you're not laughing, you're crying at the end of the day. Right, so loads of people getting in touch. Let's delve into the terrifying world of my inbox. Someone's made the point, Alan's been in touch, to say that obviously one of the main arguments they're saying is just because maybe the South African government and medical community are saying that Omicron is pretty mild, they make the point that they have a younger demographic, etc., so maybe their studies aren't reliable. I mean, Alan's made a point. I think you'll find the South African population isn't just younger, they're less obese and healthier as a rule as well. So
Yeah, I think it's interesting. They did say they have actually quite a high vaccination rate. I think the South African, one of the officials there, said something like over 65% of their elderly population has been vaccinated, which is certainly not the case for their younger population, which also might be playing a role in terms of why it seems to be more severe in terms of the disease for younger people.
Yeah, Stuart's been in touch. Thank you, Stuart. He says, I've had 2 vaccinations plus the booster. However, I'm becoming increasingly worried about the prospect of continual vaccinations and I'm reluctant to have yet more vaccinations. And I think a lot of people do feel that way, Stuart. Obviously, you know, everyone is inclined to do whatever they want to do, certainly not having a pop at the vaccine. I'm just saying, I think psychologically, a lot of people are a bit fed up with the idea. They don't like the idea that every 6 months they're going to have a jab.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where I say again about red lines. There are lots of people who are happy to have the first jab and perhaps even the second jab, but will not want to have multiple jabs going forward. And, you know, that's just people's choice, isn't it? And that's something we have to respect in all of this, the debate about what people want out of this. But we've got a poll going on our Twitter. We're asking about the new restrictions and whether you're going to follow them. Obviously, there's the travel restrictions, there's the mask wearing in shopping centres, in shops and in public transport as well. When I was on the train this morning, pretty much everybody was wearing a mask, so there does seem to be a high level of compliance. But let us know about... That doesn't surprise me. Let us know what you think, GBviews at gbnews.uk, and we'll be back just in a moment.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Good morning. It's nothing like as cold out there this morning compared to yesterday. It's a fairly drab Tuesday, though. A lot of cloud around, and most of us will see some rain and drizzle at times as well. Weather systems coming in from the northwest, bringing rain and drizzle particularly to western parts of Scotland, but also elsewhere we'll see further outbreaks of rain coming and going, particularly northwest England and north and west Wales over the hills and mountains here, and at times down the eastern side of England too. But much of the south, I suspect, will stay dry, just be fairly drab, misty, murky conditions. But as I said, it is a lot milder than it was this time yesterday. Notice some heavier rain coming into Northern Ireland through this afternoon. That's going to pep up in western Scotland also. Temperature-wise, as I said, we are well up compared to yesterday. Double digits almost across the board, maybe into the teens across South Wales and southwest England. Still pretty cold, though, in the far northeast. The wet weather does pep up, though, later on, and it turns into a very soggy evening across Scotland. The winds will also start to strengthen once more, and there'll be a band of rain whizzing across England and Wales. That'll turn pretty heavy for a time, but it shouldn't last too long, moving through, and then temperatures will fall away later in the night, well down into single figures once more. So a colder feel to Wednesday, a mix of sunshine and showers, so a brighter day with some sunny spells, but most places seeing some showers, particularly northern Scotland, where they will be turning more wintry again with snow down to low levels by the end of tomorrow. Rain showers largely elsewhere, and as I said, there'll be some brighter spells in between, a bit of sunshine, but a cold wind picking up once more, particularly noticeable on western coasts, 5, 6, 7 degrees. Add on that wind, it will feel colder. Thursday will be a cold, but largely fine and sunny day before the potential for more wet weather comes in during Friday and Saturday. So the weather chopping and changing a lot this week.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Good morning, everybody. You're watching To The Point right here on GB News with me, Patrick Christie's, and Mercy Muraki. We're here until midday, and we have got everything from the latest COVID restrictions. We're also going to be talking as well about how porous our borders are after an Albanian man was deported for the third time. All that and much, much more.
Yes, indeed, and make sure you get in touch with your views, gbviews@gbnews.uk, the email there on the screen, and we'll be getting to your views throughout the show as usual. But first, time for the latest news.
Good morning, I'm Rosie Wright. This is your news at 10 o'clock. MPs will vote later on COVID restrictions as measures to combat the Omicron variant are enforced in England. Face coverings are now compulsory in shops and public transport, and UK arrivals have to self-isolate until they receive a negative PCR result. Adults aged 18 to 39 are being advised to take a booster jab 3 months now after their second vaccine, and 12 to 15-year-olds are being told to take a second Pfizer jab 12 weeks after their first. 9 cases of the new variant have now been identified in Scotland, and that brings the UK total to at least 14.
There is the effect of natural boosting. Again, I think we were well on the way to that, even with Delta, given the high numbers of cases that we're seeing. So, it wasn't going to be too much longer before all of the cases that we were seeing in the UK were down to either reinfections or vaccine breakthroughs. And of course, in both cases, we were seeing that the consequences of such infections were remarkably mild compared to infections in the unvaccinated.
Easyjet has posted losses of more than £1 billion for the second consecutive year because of the impact of the pandemic. The airline's also seeing signs of demand softening after the discovery of the Omicron variant, but says it's too soon to say what impact it will have on the industry. Despite the uncertainty, the company's still hopeful that trading will return to pre-pandemic levels over its current year. Around 1 million homes and businesses are believed to have been damaged by Storm Arwen. In Scotland, at least 17,000 properties were without power for a fourth night. And across the UK, engineers are working to restore electricity to more than 60,000 homes. Well, that's as part of the UK faced the coldest night of autumn so far. France plans to present proposals on tackling the migrant crisis, opening the door to further talks with the UK. In a letter to Boris Johnson, the French government says it's going to put forward a balanced agreement between the UK and the EU. The country's Interior Minister says talks could then happen very quickly if negotiations are held in what they call a serious spirit. Footage has emerged which appears to show the moment a British F-35 stealth jet crashed into the Mediterranean Sea. The incident happened earlier this month on the UK's flagship carrier HMS Queen Elizabeth. The F-35 dropped off the launch ramp, as you've just seen, without becoming airborne. The pilot ejected from the jet. The Ministry of Defence says it's aware of the video, but it's too soon to comment on the cause of the incident. Day 2 of the Ghislaine Maxwell trial gets underway in just a few hours in New York City today. The court's already been told that Maxwell, who was Jeffrey Epstein's former girlfriend, preyed on vulnerable young girls for a decade and then served them up to be sexually abused. She denies all the charges against her. The new Labour shadow cabinet will meet later today following yesterday's surprise reshuffle. The new lineup includes Yvette Cooper, who returns to Labour's front bench as shadow Home Secretary. David Lammy takes over from Lisa Nandy as Sheriff Warden Secretary. And Wes Streeting is the new shadow Health Secretary. He's tweeted promising to make the NHS fit for the future. John Rentoul, chief political commentator at The Independent, says the Conservatives now face much tougher opposition on key policies.
I think the Channel Crossings issue is something where Priti Patel is now going to get find it really difficult. I mean, Yvette Cooper went toe-to-toe with Theresa May when she was Home Secretary. I mean, she understands these issues and she's extremely robust and good on the detail and will give Priti Patel a really hard time.
Prince Charles has acknowledged the appalling atrocity of slavery in Barbados as the country became a republic. During a ceremony to mark the occasion, the Prince of Wales says it's a stain on history, but the creation of the Republic offers a new beginning. The nation's first ever president, Dame Sandra Mason, has now replaced the Queen as head of state. You're right up to date here now on GB News. I'll have the latest headlines for you in half an hour. For now, though, back to the point.
Good morning, everybody. You're watching To The Point on GB News with me, Patrick Christie's, and Mercy Maroki, and we've got a massive show for you today. We're talking about all the Omicron latest and much, much more, but here's what's coming up.
Yes, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has reshuffled his shadow cabinet. Among the changes, he has appointed Yvette Cooper as Shadow Home Secretary. However, there are questions over how involved the Deputy Leader, Angela Rayner, was. He'd reshuffled his cabinet whilst she was delivering a speech somewhere else. We'll tell you more about that very shortly.
Yes. The NHS will invite all over 18s in the UK for booster vaccinations to help fight the spread of the Omicron variant, as the government tell us not to panic. Well, hard to do that when they're making a panic, isn't it? But let us know whether or not you will be following these restrictions or indeed just how you feel about the whole thing, really. We've got a Twitter poll running at GB News on Twitter.
Yes, also on the programme, a convicted Albanian people trafficker is set to be booted out of the UK for a third time after a 4-month manhunt discovered him in north-east London again. So we'll be asking how criminals are able to make their way back into Britain even after they're deported and what can be done to stop it.
We have all of that coming up and much, much more across the programme. Get in touch, as indeed hundreds of you already have. gbviews at gbnews.uk. But first, Mercy gives her views on a new unfortunate record in our criminal justice system.
A 14-year-old boy has been sentenced to life with a minimum term of 16 years for shooting 15-year-old schoolboy Keon Lincoln in an attack in Birmingham earlier this year. Riding in a stolen car, Yusuf Mustafa pulled up to the home of the victim, masked and armed with a revolver and hunting knives, stood over the victim and shot him point blank in the stomach. This sentencing sets a grim new record in our criminal justice system, as Mustafa is thought to be the youngest ever person convicted in Britain of murdering someone with a gun. There's so much wrong with this that it's hard to know where to begin. The 14-year-old, according to material presented to the court, appeared to have had, quote, a decent life with his family and had no previous conviction. He had also apparently been doing well at school, academically and in sport. To me, this is almost worse than if Mustafa had been a known gang member who lived a life of chaos, who was neglected by his family and absent from school. It just goes to show the utterly irresistible allure of gang culture in Britain for young men. It shows how worryingly attractive violence can be for young people who actually show some promise in life. How does a 14-year-old child go from a supposedly average life to shooting someone dead in the street in broad daylight? When I was 14, boys would sort out their problems by having a scrap in the playground, escaping maybe with a few scratches, few scrapes and bruises. The total ineptitude of so many young men today in dealing with their emotions, their wafer-thin willpower to resist resorting to violence, is deeply disturbing, and it's very depressing. It used to be that having a son was more desirable than having a girl. In fact, there are still some places in Europe today where the gender ratio for babies is so skewed toward boys that research has concluded that baby girls are still aborted at higher rates. But I have to say, looking at Britain today and the fate so many young men are sucked into, I'm pretty glad I had a daughter. Young, poor, often black men seem to be doomed, and I'm worried things will only get worse before they get better. Yeah, it's as mentioned an unfortunate new record. Youngest person thought to ever be convicted of murder with a weapon. I mean, there's so many questions, isn't there? How does a 14-year-old boy end up with a revolver? No previous convictions, which almost sounds like, well, of course, he's 14. Why would he have any previous convictions? But given the severity of the crime, literally driving in this stolen car with a few other boys to somebody's house in broad daylight and shooting them dead in the street, I'm just staggered that this boy seems, all everything in the court that was presented, he just seemed to be a relatively normal child. So something has gone terribly wrong. Clearly, he was hanging out with a lot of older boys. A lot of young men, I feel, get sucked into a sense of brotherhood with a lot of older boys who think they can show them how to be a man. And then they get them to do things like this, and it's just really quite tragic.
Yeah, I mean, I was on the tube the other day, actually, and there was this group of lads who were probably about 14, actually, who was just sat next to me, and they're all chatting away, and one of them was talking about the fact that he'd got off at a particular tube stop a few stops back, he'd bumped into someone from his school, they clearly had some kind of issue going on together, and then he was like, oh, it doesn't matter though, because I've got a shank on me. And it was like, well, hang on a minute. And then all of his mates like, yeah. I'm thinking, how common is it now that there are just children walking around with knives?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really common, I think, especially in some places in inner city London. I do wonder what the solution to all this is. And clearly, it has to be more than just stop and search. Stop and search it's not the answer to the problem. I do think it's funny that the government pump, millions, tens of millions of pounds into behavioural insights and trying to, change the way people react to improve public policy. But when it comes to this issue of knife crime and trying to look at why it is so many young people in this country, often very young, very poor ethnic minority men, they end up getting sucked into these crime gangs and all this stuff, and nothing seems to be done about it. And Sadiq Khan seems to be very quiet on it as well. He does, and the Met Police, I have to say, don't do a very good job either. But as I say, I think it's a problem that's probably going to get worse before it gets better.
Yes, indeed, unfortunately. Keep those views coming in, gbviews at gbnews.uk. I must say that Paul has been in touch to say that that he actually disagrees with you when it comes to having a daughter. He's got a boy and he's happy because the family name will carry on.
Ah,
there
well.
you go. There's lots of pressure on me, actually, because I'm an only child. Shocker, I know. And
your mum just gave up after she said, never again.
One was very much enough, I think, when it came to me. Can you imagine if there's two of these little terrors walking around? But anyway, and so the family name would die out with me if I don't manage to procreate. So obviously, it's my duty to.
Very heavy burden to carry.
Very heavy burden to carry.
Yeah.
Very heavy burden. But anyway, here we go. Right. Well, look, let's move on. It's been a busy 24 hours in Westminster as Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer launched a surprise reshuffle of Labour's top team yesterday, which is the second big shake-up of Sir Keir's shadow ministerial team since he took over as Labour leader last year.
Yes, and the emergence of the Omicron, I nearly said Omicron again, Omicron COVID variant, has led the government to flex its emergency powers again in a bid to flatten the curve. Well, here to break down Labour's frontbench changes and the government's new rules is a Conservative Member of Parliament for North West Leicestershire, Andrew Bridgen, who joins us now. Thank you so much for coming in the studio. So, I mean, firstly, I do have to start with the Omicron variant. And the fact Patrick mentioned earlier, it's not like Parliament has voted for any new restrictions. What do you make of the restrictions that the government has brought in so far? Are they proportionate given what we know about the variant so far?
Well, we don't know a lot. I think the government is between a rock and a hard place. It's damned if it does and damned if it doesn't. It's brought in some restrictions, which we will actually debate and vote on this evening. I doubt they'll actually be pushed to a vote. Is a bit of a fait accompli. But I mean, I think what we're seeing is compliance with new regulations driven by fear. And I think the behavioural unit in Number 10 are well aware that it's actually far easier to create a fearful environment and drive compliance with regulations than it is to actually calmly explain to people what the risks are. All the science tells me that as a virus evolves, it becomes more transmissible and less pathogenic. And I think that's the initial findings we're seeing coming out of South Africa with regard to the Omicron virus.
And were you countenance, because obviously we're heading into the Christmas period now, Will you and your colleagues countenance anything like what we saw last year with, I know Christmas wasn't entirely cancelled, but there were severe restrictions on how many people you could have. Is that something you would countenance, you and your
Well,
colleagues?
that's actually something, Mercy, I raised with Sajid Javid at the dispatch box yesterday in the chamber when he announced that these new restrictions were coming in as a precaution. They'll be reviewed in 3 weeks' time. I pointed out to the Secretary of State that in 3 weeks' time, Parliament will be in Christmas recess. So how is he going to ensure that there is parliamentary scrutiny, democratic scrutiny of any changes to the regulations that the government wishes to make? Or are we having government by diktat, which is unacceptable?
Well, what did he say?
He said he's trying to do it in less than 3 weeks. But to be honest, I don't think he really had an answer. I think I'm probably off the Christmas card list.
Oh, no, not another one. That list is bigger than the Christmas card list now, surely. But are you concerned about the psychological effect that this could potentially have on our nation? And also, as well, I'd like to ask you a bit about the potential, anyway, for a pingdemic. We had a pingdemic earlier on, didn't we, where people are getting pinged all the time and you self-isolate. It looks to me like this now, you know, if Marjorie down the road tests positive, you might end up having to lock yourself away for 10 days.
Over Christmas and disrupting people's lives. Yes, I am very concerned about the effect of all this. I'm particularly concerned about the younger generation who perhaps haven't got the resilience of experience to realise that not everything they read in the newspapers is true, and they've been bombarded over the last few years by crises, whether it's Brexit or the economy. A third of them are worried that the whole planet's going to burn up due to global warming and COVID on top. And I think we're going to have a huge problem with mental health going forward, which is going to last a lot longer than the COVID situation.
And you talk about a number of crises that we've faced over the last years, whether it
well,
be
apparently crises. I'm not personally sure myself.
So-called crises.
What I call a crisis.
Whether it be Brexit, the environment, mental health, all sorts. And people will be thinking we've had a Conservative government for an awfully long time and I'm not quite sure my life is getting better, and they might be looking to another party in the next general election to vote for, and in the hopes that their lives will improve. Keir Starmer obviously reshuffled his cabinet yesterday in the hopes of making the Labour Party more attractive, I suppose. Are you worried about that at all?
Well, I actually got into politics as a Conservative to prevent the Socialists, the Labour Party, getting into power. Really, the only alternative with our two-party, main party system is if the Conservatives aren't in government, then we're going to have the Labour Party with everything that entails and the damage they do to our social fabric and our economy every time they ever get in. And it's happened all over the world. I voted actually against the tax rises put in by our government earlier. I did say to the Chief Whip that if Labour economic policies worked, I'd be in the Labour Party. They don't, and they won't work for us either, quite honestly. But Keir Starmer is desperate to move his party back to the centre ground. That is sensible politics. I think the weakness of the opposition is not helping the government to perform to its maximum. I think there's a certain cushion there. They feel that Keir Starmer is unelectable, and it really doesn't matter how he shuffles his cabinet. And let's face it, apparently it took a very long time to do the reshuffle because from experience, we know from Angela Rayner, if you refuse to be sacked, they have to promote you. And in fact, the only person whose resignation he could accept was probably his own.
Well, there you go. One point there, I think that maybe it could be a sticky wicket for the Tories is Yvette Cooper, of course, now Shadow Home Secretary. She does know her stuff. She potentially has, and Priti Patel's, under the cot, let's be honest. She has got the potential maybe to cause Patel a few issues there, do you think?
She's also got the potential to cause herself considerable issues in Pontefract with a majority of about 1,300 and advocating basically that anyone who wants to come into this country should be allowed to come in. I'm not sure that's going to go down well with the former Red Wall voters who now vote Conservative.
David Lammy, of course, as well, Foreign Secretary. Shadow.
Well, it'll be entertaining.
All right, fair enough. I'll have to wait and see what comes out of there. But look, do you think though that maybe now that this shadow cabinet is a bit more heavy duty than the one before, which is made up of people who weren't household names in their own homes?
We'll see. I mean, the proof will be in the pudding. They've got a job to do. We need a good opposition to make the government perform. I hope they will step up to the plate, but I think, quite honestly, that they're a long way from the dreams and aspirations of the general public, certainly in the Midlands and the North.
There's a story that I'm going to be covering later on, we're going to be covering later on, which is about this Albanian chap who's been deported 3 times now, and he's also a human trafficker to boot, and he's got a list of criminal records as long as my arm. Is Britain there for the taking now, do you think, when it comes to immigration and porous borders?
Well, of course, they always play the Human Rights Act card, and there are plenty of lawyers out there willing to work on their behalf and earn considerable sums of money at taxpayers' expense. I mean, clearly, I think Dominic Raab's got a job to do now to reform the Human Rights Act in the UK so that we're not taken advantage of. And also, by deterring people from making that journey across the Channel, we're cutting off the supply to these people traffickers who we know are absolutely ruthless. I mean, one the other day shot one of the migrants twice in the leg because he refused to get into a dangerous dinghy. I mean, these are completely the lowest of the low. And quite honestly, Macron's shedding crocodile tears about the disaster in the Channel last week, when he should be cracking down and arresting these people.
Yes, well, Andrew, thank you for joining us this morning to talk about that. Andrew Bridgen, the MP there for North West Leicestershire, joining us. I think we can go for it to a quick break before going to some of your views. I'm sure you have a lot of views on Omicron and that story we will be bringing you later about that Albanian people trafficker who has had to be kicked out for the 3rd time from the UK. Well, we'll bring you the latest on all of that in a second.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Good morning. It's nothing like as cold out there this morning compared to yesterday. It's a fairly drab Tuesday though, a lot of cloud around, and most of us will see some rain and drizzle at times as well. Weather systems coming in from the northwest, bringing rain and drizzle particularly to western parts of Scotland, but also elsewhere we'll see further outbreaks of rain coming and going, particularly northwest England and north and west Wales over the hills and mountains here, and at times down the eastern side of England too. But much of the south, I suspect, will stay dry, just be fairly drab, misty, murky conditions. But as I said, it is a lot milder than it was this time yesterday. Notice some heavier rain coming into Northern Ireland through this afternoon. That's going to pep up in western Scotland also. Temperature-wise, as I said, we are well up compared to yesterday. Double digits almost across the board, maybe into the teens across South Wales and southwest England. Still pretty cold, though, in the far northeast. The wet weather does pep up, though, later on, and it turns into a very soggy evening across Scotland. The winds will also start to strengthen once more, and there'll be a band of rain whizzing across England and Wales. That'll turn pretty heavy for a time, but it shouldn't last too long, moving through, and then temperatures will fall away later in the night, well down into single figures once more. So a colder feel to Wednesday, a mix of sunshine and showers, so a brighter day with some sunny spells, but most places seeing some showers, particularly northern Scotland, where they will be turning more wintry again with snow down to low levels by the end of tomorrow. Rain showers largely elsewhere, and as I said, there'll be some brighter spells in between, a bit of sunshine, but a cold wind picking up once more, particularly noticeable on western coasts, 5, 6, 7 degrees. Add on that wind, it will feel colder. Thursday will be a cold, but largely fine and sunny day before the potential for more wet weather comes in during Friday and Saturday. So the weather chopping and changing a lot this week.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Yes, British socialite Ghislaine Maxwell appeared in court in New York City yesterday for the first day of her trial on sex trafficking charges. Now, prosecutors opened the trial alleging that Maxwell preyed on vulnerable young girls, manipulated them and served them up to be sexually abused.
Yes, Maxwell denies all charges and her defence claims she is being used as a scapegoat for her former partner, convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Epstein died in prison in 2019 as he awaited trial for sex trafficking charges in an apparent suicide. While Andre Walker is a political commentator and New York Observer columnist who's keeping a close eye on this case for us. Andre, thanks for joining us. The defence and the prosecution set out their cases yesterday. Just give us a gist of what was said.
Well, effectively, this is the fallout, as you said, of the Jeffrey Epstein situation, including allegations against Prince Andrew. First of all, the prosecution are alleging that Ghislaine Maxwell effectively acted as a madam for Jeffrey Epstein, procuring young women under the guise of massages, and then he would abuse them quite horribly, particularly younger girls. Now, remember, we are talking about a man who is already a convicted child sex offender, Epstein, that is, and all the girls involved, or many of them, were under the age of 18. Important to bear in mind, in the United States of America, the age of consent is 18. Now, Ghislaine Maxwell will argue that she was simply nothing more than Jeffrey Epstein's partner. And the idea that she was involved is simply just making her a scapegoat. Many of us will remember the British police's failure over Jimmy Savile led to allegations against other celebrities that were later proved to have been wholly unfair. But of course, one of the big things that many British viewers won't realise is that travelling across state lines can bring you into trouble with the law if you are committing an offence. And let me just explain that to you. If you ask a 16-year-old girl from, say, New Jersey to come to New York and you know that she is going to be sexually abused, then you will be prosecuted for effectively child sex trafficking in the same way as you would be charged if you came over the border from France to the United Kingdom. And so Ghislaine Maxwell is in significant trouble if she was aware that these girls were being abused and she was part of procuring them for Jeffrey Epstein.
Well, absolutely. And, you know, some people are saying, aren't they, that she's being used as a scapegoat for Jeffrey Epstein. What do you make of that?
I think the troubling element of this for everybody, and this goes for both Ghislaine Maxwell and Prince Andrew, this man was convicted of child sex offences, and we are talking about things sometimes that happened after that conviction, after he was released from his very brief spell in prison. And so, of course, I wouldn't expect anybody to necessarily know the behaviour of absolutely everybody they've ever associated with. But once somebody in Epstein's position has been convicted, once they've gone to prison, and then to associate with them afterwards, I would say is clearly a significant weakness, particularly if you are Ghislaine Maxwell or Prince Andrew and you're trying to argue that you didn't know what this man was up to. It was in all the papers. It was huge news at the time. Perhaps not in the United Kingdom, but anybody in the United States would have known that this man had been convicted.
And if my memory doesn't fail me, I think she could be facing something like 80 years if she's found guilty. You can correct me on that one. But is there a chance that she might actually, you know, reveal some details, perhaps in the hopes that other people, to implicate other people in this in the hopes that her own guilt will be diminished almost and she might get a shorter sentence? Or is that too late for that now?
I personally think it's too late. I'm going to explain why. Pretty much everyone in the United States of America is entitled to a jury trial. They don't have a huge system of magistrates over there. And so effectively, most cases finish with a plea deal. Now, in the case of Ghislaine Maxwell, one would expect that the district attorney would have asked her for revealing details on perhaps some other people who've been associated with Epstein, but for whom there are no allegations that have surfaced. You know, people like the Clintons, and indeed, I suppose, in the case of Prince Andrew as well. Now, the fact that she has arrived in court would suggest that whatever plea deal was offered, she has refused. And so they will then go through the jury trial in full. I would suggest, because of that we're probably beyond a plea deal. But remember, you know, there is always a possibility, whether in the United Kingdom or in the United States, that a trial can be stopped and a plea can be changed from not guilty to guilty in exchange for some charges being dropped. I don't see it happening, particularly in this case, but I certainly wouldn't rule it out completely.
Now, Andre, thank you very, very much. Andre Walker, there, political commentator, New York Observer columnist as well, and regular, of course, on GB News, just whizzing you through what we can expect from this Ghislaine Maxwell case. Well, we're going to go now to my inbox, the terrifying world of, and see what some of you have been saying. Thank you very much, everybody who's been getting in touch. Lots of reaction, actually, to your monologue there on youth violence, and what you were saying. People saying, look, you know, back in my day, it was all about who had the nicest BMX. Now it seems to be about who's the biggest gang member, and I think that's where we are, isn't it? Barry?
Yeah, but I mean, I think, to be honest, fundamentally, it is still about, probably most spats between these young kids are probably about trainers or something of that nature, because what else is a 14-year-old boy going to be rowing about? It's not going to, you know, be anything substantial, is it? So I think it's the methods they used to deal with it. Before, you just have a bit of a fight and get it over and done with. Now they carry around knives and guns, in this case, a revolver in this case.
Yes, can I just say, the hundreds, and indeed it is hundreds of you who are emailing me to inform me that Omicron is an anagram for moronic. Yes, I am aware of that. So thank you very much, everyone who's emailing in to inform me that that is the case. But yes, I think there's a certain irony there, isn't there? But yes, no, look, a lot of you as well saying that actually they've had enough of any kind of restrictions. Also, they feel as though that at the moment, what the government's doing when it comes to kind of retroactive, I suppose you would say, coronavirus laws, that it's not really doesn't seem that democratic. Andrew Bridgen indeed was in earlier and alluded something to that effect.
Yes, and keep your views coming in. GBViews at gbnews.uk. But now, police have released an e-fit of a man they would like to speak to in connection with several indecent exposures in North London. The man is accused of flashing dog walkers on 2 separate occasions in Roxbourne Park, Harrow, and was later seen walking naked from the waist down around Hatch End swimming pool at 4:15 on Thursday, November the 4th. So that's his e-fit there on the screen. If you recognise him, of course, do contact the police.
Well, yes, indeed. Gosh, well,
very realistic e-fits these days, I have to say.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, he actually looks like that. Otherwise, you know. But yes, there we go. Well, look, obviously, make sure you take a note of that image, and obviously, everyone in North London, take care, I suppose. But look, after the break, top London GP Dr. Lawrence Jerlis helps us make sense of the new Omicron variant of coronavirus and how the NHS will cope with booster jabs for all over 18. But before that, let's have a look at this morning's news with our friend Rosie.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Good morning, I'm Rosie Wright. Let's get you up to date with the latest headlines. MPs will vote on new COVID restrictions later as measures to combat the Omicron variant are enforced in England. Face coverings are now compulsory in shops and on public transport, and all UK arrivals now have to self-isolate until they receive a negative PCR result. 9 cases of the variant have now been identified in Scotland, and that brings the UK total to at least 14. Around 1 million homes and businesses are believed to have been damaged by Storm Arwen. In Scotland, at least 17,000 properties were without power for a 4th night. And across the UK, engineers are working to try to restore electricity to more than 60,000 homes. France is proposing what it describes as a balanced agreement between the UK and the EU to try to tackle the migrant crisis. The French government says it's sending a letter to Boris Johnson. If it's well received, they say, then talks can resume quickly. Now, footage has emerged which appears to show the moment a British F-35 stealth jet crashed into the Mediterranean Sea. Well, it happened early this month on the UK's flagship carrier HMS Queen Elizabeth. The Ministry of Defence says it's too soon to comment on the cause of the incident. Prince Charles has acknowledged the appalling atrocity of slavery in Barbados during a ceremony marking its transition to a republic. The nation's first ever president, Dame Sandra Mason, has replaced now the Queen of Head of State. You are up to date here on GB News. I'll have more on all of today's top stories for you in half an hour.
Good morning again. Now, all UK adults will be offered a COVID booster jab to help stop another wave of infections driven by the new variant Omicron. Early evidence suggests that the Omicron variant has a higher reinfection risk, but scientists say it will take about 3 weeks before it's known how the variant impacts vaccine effectiveness.
Until then, England's Deputy Chief Medical Officer, Professor Jonathan Van Tam, JVT, says vaccine boosting is the thing that we can do most easily while we wait for the science mist to clear. So meanwhile, the government has introduced new self-isolation rules and made face coverings mandatory if you want to visit shops or get on public transport in England, and that all came into force as of 4 a.m. this morning.
Yes, well, Dr. Lawrence Gurlis runs Same Day Doctor and has over 30 years' experience in healthcare. Thanks for joining us again this morning. Should we be worried about this virus? I know that we don't know much about it yet, but we always knew that it was going to mutate, didn't we? So we should be sort of prepared.
Of course, Mercy, exactly so. These viruses do mutate, and they usually mutate to become less virulent, less infectious, more infectious but less powerful. And that is probably what's going to happen here. The answer to your question, should we be worried, is no. I think this is the biggest example of mass hysteria since the Royal Free Disease of 1955. I think people have lost control of the narrative totally. It's been a long time since we've been told to be worried about variants. I thought it had gone away, but now just before Christmas, everyone's dreamt up another excuse to create anxiety, to limit people's freedoms. And this is really affecting people's lives. I mean, I'm concerned about physical and mental health. I saw a lady last week with ovarian cancer, which had not been diagnosed because she couldn't have a face-to-face consultation. And it's very, very distressing. I'm worried about mental health of school children having to wear masks and so on. So these changes are not without consequences. These rules that are being brought in are on the basis of very little evidence, have enormous consequences for working people, for people's physical and mental health. No, we shouldn't be worried. And it's gone very quiet since the weekend. You will notice that, I don't see any stories of people with the Omicron variant being very ill or being in hospital or being in intensive care. That's gone very quiet. So where are they? These 15 Dutch people who had the Omicron variant, are they sick? Are they coughing? Do they have a fever? Are they in hospital? Or are they still in the quarantine hotel, waiting to be let out?
Well, I mean, as well, there was either deliberate or accidental misinformation. It was the Botswana variant for a while, wasn't it? That was supposedly originating in the bodies of people with HIV. Then Botswana came out and said, actually, it originated from travellers, potentially even diplomats, actually, who came to the country, none of whom had HIV. I'm yet to actually read a news report, and look, mate, I'm willing to be proved wrong on this, of someone dying a horrific death as a result of the Omicron variant. I've not read that. I've not seen that anywhere. And one would have thought that if the government were going to introduce pithy slogans like "Don't bring COVID home for Christmas," and they were going to continue along the lines of at least holding Christmas to ransom, maybe they could do it for something that might actually kill someone.
You're absolutely right, Patrick. That it's the silence. It's the dog that isn't barking in the night. There have been no stories. Even coming out of South Africa, it's not entirely clear. Although the number of people being admitted to hospital has increased, it's not entirely clear that's down to the Omicron variant. In fact, on this flight from South Africa to Holland, apparently there were 64 positive cases, of which 15 were Omicron. Well, that tells me, if my maths is right, that 49 people had a different variant. And again, I don't know if they're sick. It has gone very quiet. We hear about these people in Scotland that have been diagnosed with the Omicron variant. Well, how are they? Do they just have a runny nose? At the end of the day, it seems very likely that this is actually a milder variant, and as such, if it pushes out the other variants, it will be the answer to all our problems, because it'll be like a vaccine. We'll all get immunity, and we can stop worrying about this.
But some people might say, and I'll read you a line here from Office for National Statistics. In England and Wales, from the week ending the 3rd of January 2020 to the 2nd of July 2021, there were 97,981 excess deaths compared to what we would expect in a non-pandemic period. That's official government data. So there will be people who'll be very worried that this could be, we don't know yet, but they'll say this could be still deadly, and it's right that we take as many precautions as we possibly can. What would you say to that?
Well, look, we know that last December there was a massive, the Kent variant was very, very seriously ill. I caught it, a lot of people died. A number of excess deaths are not due to COVID. We've seen an increase in suicides, in mental health, in heart disease, and in cancers, and deaths from all of those. And those are my principal concerns at the moment, particularly being on the front line, seeing patients every day who are not able to access healthcare because everything is focused on COVID. So those statistics which cover a long period, some of which had high COVID, some of which had low COVID, don't tell the full story. I'm interested in here and now. And right now, the hospitalizations are going down. The death rates are well down into, 35 deaths, I think, reported yesterday. Bear in mind that 1,700 people a day die in the UK. If 35 of them died of COVID, that's very sad. But bear in mind, we haven't had a flu epidemic. We were told, if you remember, we're going to get a massive flu epidemic this year, along with COVID. Didn't happen. As I said, it wouldn't. So,
But also as well, people are dying from mental health issues, and some of those are a direct result of some of the restrictions that we've placed on us, whether or not it's exacerbated existing mental health issues or whether people lost their jobs and they couldn't support their family. People are on an NHS waiting list. People are having to pay for some of their own operations. Not minor stuff as well sometimes. Things like having stents fitted, for example. Look, I'm just going to ask something now very, very quickly, and I think a lot of media outlets are too afraid to ask this. And I just want your honest opinion on it, right? Is there any chance, do you think, that the government is highlighting the Omicron variant at this particular time of year because it's convenient for them to do so. Is there an element of scaremongering in this? Is this potentially the plan or a plan in place so that we don't absolutely let rip just before Christmas and swamp the NHS?
Yes, is a short answer. It is scaremongering. It is deliberate. I think it's a knee-jerk reaction that something has to be done, and it's better to overreact than underreact. So the short answer to your question is yes, it's scaremongering, and I think we're all fed up with being manipulated in this way.
Good stuff. Thank you very much. It's great to have someone on who's not afraid to speak their mind. Thank you very much, Dr. Lawrence Gurlis, of course, who's had years and years and years of experience on the front line of our health service.
Well, let us know what you think about the restrictions coming in, the variant. Is it something that's worrying you? You can get in touch on GB Views at gbnews.uk, and we'll be going to those very shortly. But also, you can take part in our poll on our Twitter at GBNews and tell us about whether you'll be following the restrictions, how you feel about these new restrictions that have come in, mandatory face masks in shops and in public transport as well, liable to a fine if you don't comply. I think it's 200 for being caught not wearing a mask the first time, and I think the maximum is 6,400. That's the maximum you can be fined for that. So let us know what you think on our Twitter as well.
Indeed. Well, moving on. Human trafficker Hazir Lala is set to be deported from the UK for the third time. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Let that sink in. For the third time after a 4-month manhunt. So the 39-year-old Albanian man was discovered in northeast London just over a year after he was originally deported. The National Crime Agency has been hunting Mr. Lala since July, and apparently he was found in Walthamstow on Friday, laying low in Walthamstow.
Yes, well, Mr. Lala has a long string of previous convictions, and his presence in the UK presented an unacceptable risk to the public. That's what the National Crime Agency have stated. While tackling organised immigration crime and human trafficking is a priority for the agency, so this will not be looking good for them at all. Harjap Singh Bengal is an immigration lawyer, joins us now. Thank you very much for joining us, Harjap. How come this was allowed to happen? Morning. Well, how come this was allowed to happen? Human trafficking is not a minor crime by any stretch of the imagination.
Not at all.
Why on earth was this man allowed to return to the UK twice? This is the third time we're having to deport this man. What's gone wrong?
What's gone wrong is there's been failures to detect him, failures on the system to pick up on the fingerprinting system. But more importantly, we have to realize that there's more money made in people trafficking than there is in drug smuggling. So the priority should be on catching these guys. But make no mistake about it, this guy is just probably at the lower end of the chain of people smugglers. The real people smugglers are sitting in countries where you can't be extradited from. It literally runs like you see in the movies, like The Godfather or The Sopranos, where there's one guy at the top and then you have all these buffer guys. And then these are the guys, if the real guys we need to catch are the ones who we don't even know about. They avoid detection. They're sitting in a mansion, in a villa somewhere, in countries where you can't be extradited from. But this does go to show that the system is totally flawed, that if we keep on deporting people to Europe, they'll keep on coming back again. There are multiple routes and ways to come into the UK which we haven't secured or which we're unaware about. People can be deported here, convicted here, even sentenced here, and if sent back, they will find a way back. So that's what's gone wrong. He was sent back, actually, in this case, to Belgium to be sentenced. He was sentenced for 5 years, but he was out in a few months. Now, the sentences for people smuggling are too lenient. You hear about drug smugglers getting life and 30 and 40 years. You don't hear about people smugglers getting life or 10, or 20, 30 years. They're usually out in a matter of months, if not a year or two. There's no deterrent for these guys. If we started banging up people for life, who are directly involved for this, it might act as a major deterrent. Plus, there was no jail here. We're sending him back. We were probably better off jailing him for life here, weren't we? At least we'd know where he is and he'd get his sentence instead of sending him back and say, come on back again, mate, don't worry. And we've wasted money hunting him down, like you've said.
Yeah. Well, look, how anyone wants to bet as to how long it is before he's back again? I mean, come on. But look, seriously, if he wants to fight this, I think it's a bit late in the day for him now. But if someone like this wants to fight deportation, do they get legal aid? How does that really work?
Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Most of the times they probably don't qualify for legal aid. Despite the myths, and this is something which, we've got a chance to clarify, legal aid for immigration is virtually cut. It only comes in at appeal stages after you've been refused, and if your case has merits. So if, say, an economic migrant claimed asylum and his case didn't have any merits, he wouldn't qualify for legal aid, or he or she wouldn't qualify for legal aid. So lawyers actually are not working on legal aid. They're working privately for these people if the clients want to pay. A lot of asylum seekers just represent themselves in courts, and judges will confirm that, clerks will confirm that. They go themselves and they don't have representation because, and now this will come as a surprise as a lot to your viewers, a lot of the time the Home Office don't turn up to appeals. So there's a vast percentage of appeals, more than 10, 20%, where the Home Office just don't bother sending anyone to fight their case. And, it's literally just the migrant and the judge sitting there discussing the case, and the judge will hear it and make a decision. That's how incompetent the system is. That's how flawed the system is, that the Home Office cannot be bothered to send people to fight appeals. I see that a lot of the times, and therefore a client wouldn't require a lawyer because he knows no one's coming from the Home Office anyway. So it would just be him and the judge. Why would he want a lawyer for? He can talk directly to the judge. So deportation, you get a right of appeal against it. And that's just not like, asylum seekers or illegal entrants. It's also people who have been convicted, who might have had indefinite leave to remain, and they might have families here. And there's a lot of good reasons why people would want to fight deportation, because if you get sentenced for a year or more, you get that deportation action taken against you. But you might have a wife here, you might have 2 kids here, and your sentence might have been for 13 months. And you might feel, hold on, you're sending me back to a country where I haven't been for like 40 odd years. That's a bit harsh. And then people do compare themselves to people who are born here, British citizens who are born here, saying, well, hold on, you've got British-born rapists here, and you're not sending them back.
Yeah.
And all I did was 13 months, or, and I'm getting sent back to a country I've never been to.
We do have to end there. Thank you so much for giving us that clarification there and discussing what many people will find very worrying. I think people probably overestimate how much control we have of who actually comes into our country, especially in cases where we've actually said you can't come back, and then this case proves they so easily are able to find their way back. Well, Harjap Singh Bangal there was an immigration lawyer.
Yes, absolutely right. Well, look, we're just going to move away from that briefly. The impact of Storm Arwen is still being felt across the northeast of England as hundreds of families are still left without power. Many roads are still closed, conditions are still dangerous, and some are still waiting for water and electricity. As our northeast of England reporter, the wonderful Rachel Sweeney, shows us, the damage will take months to repair.
Each morning, people across the northeast of England are assessing the colossal destruction caused by the storm that ripped through our region. There's distress, disbelief and doubt over whether some damage can be repaired. Alnwick Town Juniors Football Club is a registered charity. The site is used by 1,000 people every week, and now the premises has lost its entire roof. This £1.1 million facility was 6 years in the making, torn apart in just a few hours.
Expected it to be maybe a few of the big steel roof sheets maybe flying around. And then when we came up here, realised the entire roof was gone, came around the corner here, realised it was on the pitch, and then when we went in the building, it was, that was the worst because we knew, the extent of the damage at that point.
How did you feel when you saw it?
Oh, just gutted. Obviously, all the time and effort that's gone into it. We had a 2-year delay with COVID in opening the building as well, and yeah, it was just heart-wrenching, really. But it's just one of those things that we need to kind of pick up the pieces literally, and everyone will pull together in the local community and the club, and we'll get it sorted.
Despite Northumberland seeing the fastest gusts of up to 98 miles per hour, it wasn't the only part of the northeast region that saw destruction. Here in Trimdon at Link Kennels, the roof is completely blown off, and there was a hugely speedy rescue operation of 37 dogs. The team managed to get them all out in 45 minutes.
Devastated. It's a life's work going into them kennels. So I don't know. We're going to try our best to combat this. The greyhound community's been brilliant. They've come together and helped me. We've got the dogs into other places, and as you can see, there's lads have actually dropped jobs to come and start the roof now. But I don't know. It's a long way back to get. It's a long way to do anything, get anywhere near where we were before. So
you can see how deflated you are.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, good.
The owners are grateful to the people who've stopped everything to help. 20 minutes down the road, a hotel owner is offering people without water or power a place to stay.
You know, me and my mother sat there with the prospect of sitting in an empty hotel with no power or electricity and having to stay in the building, and it's a scary thought. So we thought if we can help somebody else who might be stuck in the same situation of having to spend a night in the house whereby they can't boil a kettle or keep themselves warm, then we'd do what we could. And there's hundreds of thousands of people in our area. Sometimes you can't rely on just the grid coming to you and getting your electricity. You need to be able to go, right, well, what can we do to help the person who's next door to us, or somebody who's down the street who maybe their house doesn't have electricity back on yet. And I think it would be nice if we could all just do a little bit.
A little bit goes a long way in a crisis. As people wait to hear about insurance claims, one thing is for certain: community is crucial at a time like this.
Well, that was Rachel Sweeney there giving us the update on the damage that Storm Arwen has done. Obviously, some people are still stranded without electricity, without power as well. So let's just hope they manage to get that electricity up and running again.
Yeah, indeed. Quickly, hopefully. Yes, we're going to go to the views. GB Views at gbnews.uk. Steve's been in touch. Patrick, this is a load of old tosh. Enough is enough. The NHS excuse is played out. Their dismal performance is because of gross waste and union tampering and such. So Steve's had enough, it's fair to say, of any kind of restrictions. Look, how do you feel about this? Is wearing a mask on public transport or in a shop that much of an issue for you? Do you think it's a slippery slope? Are you just annoyed at the fact that we're doing anything at all?
Yeah, I think for me it's the wearing masks in public transport and shops. But if you're in a crowded place or, a crowded event, or if you're in hospitality, you don't have to wear a mask. I mean, that makes absolutely no sense to me, which makes me think they're not really taking it as seriously as they think they are then, if it's only in public transport and in shops.
Yes, indeed. Lots of you kind of sharing this view. Also, a lot of you getting very hot under the collar about the Albanian chap that we've had to deport for a third time. And I am actually going to be bringing you my views on that particular topic, my points on it very, very shortly. But before all of that, we are going to go to a break.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. It's much milder out there today compared to yesterday. It's a fairly grey day for most, with a bit of rain across the northwest, and we'll all get some heavy rain and gusty winds overnight tonight. The isobar's fairly close together today. It is fairly breezy, and there's a tangle of weather fronts covering Scotland, and this one in particular later will bring some heavier rain to Northern Ireland and western Scotland. The rain fairly light and patchy through much of the afternoon, but also affecting northwest England, drizzly at times across eastern England. Apart from the odd spot of drizzle over the hills, much of the south dry, but it is predominantly cloudy. A bit of brightness poking through at times. We'll see temperatures up to maybe 13 Celsius. Generally double digits, so much milder than yesterday. But turning wetter through this afternoon for Northern Ireland, western Scotland. This band of heavy rain will then swing its way across England and Wales through the evening and overnight, accompanied by some gusty winds. The winds will suddenly start to whip up, and it could get very windy on some of these North Sea coasts, particularly across the eastern side of England through this evening and during the early hours. It will turn colder into tomorrow, but temperatures mostly holding up in mid-single figures tonight. A brighter day for many tomorrow, but there will be showers, lots of showers coming in across Wales, Northern Ireland, and down the eastern side. It could be quite a wet and still very windy day here. Elsewhere, I say just one or two showers, a bit more in the way of sunshine compared to today, but a colder feel with temperatures back in single figures, and add on that wind, it will feel even colder. Quite a chilly wind blowing through Wednesday. The showers mostly of rain, but increasingly turning to snow across northern Scotland during Wednesday evening, and just the threat of a bit more snow pushing south during Wednesday night and into Thursday morning. So chance it could be a bit icy on Thursday morning. There could be some snow around. Overall Thursday, though, looking like a dry and a bright day for many, with plenty of wintry sunshine. Bye for now.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Good morning, everybody. You're watching To The Point on GB News with me, Patrick Christie's, and Mercy Muroki. We're here for another hour, looking at the very latest from the Omicron variant, of course, discussing developments in the migrant row between France and the UK, and the Queen being ditched as head of state by Barbados.
Yes, make sure you get in touch with your views, as usual, on gbviews@gbnews.uk, and we're running a Twitter poll as well on the new restrictions. So go on our Twitter @gbnews.uk and let us know your views there as well. But first, it's time for the latest news.
I'm Rosie Wright. This is your news at just gone 11 o'clock. MPs will vote on new COVID restrictions later as measures to combat the Omicron variant are in force in England. Face coverings are now compulsory in shops and on public transport. And all arrivals into the UK now have to self-isolate until they receive a negative PCR result.
Well, I don't really like wearing them, but if I have to, I will do.
Some people will be used to it, so they're just like, okay, it's going to happen. It was going to happen anyway.
As a young person, I'm quite worried because, well, we don't know much about it, so I'm just being cautious.
I'm not worried, but I do think there'll be another lockdown.
Well, I'd like to see everything go back to normal. That's the whole point of having your jabs, I think.
Well, the Prime Minister has described the measures as proportionate and responsible and says that vaccines, though, are still the best line of defence. Well, all adults aged 18 to 39 are being advised to take a booster jab 3 months after their second dose now, and 12 to 15-year-olds are being told to take a second Pfizer jab 12 weeks after their first. 9 cases of the Omicron variant have now been identified in Scotland. That brings the UK total to at least 14.
There is the effect of natural boosting. Again, I think we were well on the way to that, even with Delta, given the high numbers of cases that we're seeing. So, it wasn't going to be too much longer before all of the cases that we were seeing in the UK were down to either reinfections or vaccine breakthroughs. And of course, in both cases, we were seeing that the consequences of such infections were remarkably mild compared to infections in the unvaccinated.
In other news, retailers are making a shocking profit on petrol, according to the RAC. The motoring body says that fuel is around 12 pence a litre too expensive and estimates 19 pence profit is being made on every litre, 3 times more than before the pandemic. Oil prices fell last Friday and the RAC says retailers will lose credibility if that's not reflected at the pumps this week. Easyjet have posted losses of more than £1 billion for the second consecutive year because of the impact of the pandemic. The airline's also seeing signs of demand softening after the discovery of a new COVID variant, but says it's too soon to say what impact it will have on the industry. Despite the uncertainty, the company's still hopeful trading will return to pre-pandemic levels over the current year. Around 1 million homes and businesses are believed to have been damaged by Storm Arwen. In Scotland, at least 17,000 properties were without power for a fourth night. And across the UK, engineers are working now to restore electricity to more than 60,000 homes. Well, it's as part of the UK faced the coldest night of autumn so far. France plans to present proposals on tackling the migrant crisis, opening the door to further talks with the UK. In a letter to Boris Johnson, the French government says it will put forward a balanced agreement between the UK and the EU. The country's interior minister says talks could then happen very quickly if negotiations are held in what they describe as a serious spirit. Footage has emerged which appears to show the moment a British F-35 stealth jet crashed into the Mediterranean Sea. The incident happened early this month on the UK's flagship carrier HMS Queen Elizabeth. The F-35 dropped off a launch ramp, as you've just seen, without becoming airborne. The pilot ejected from the jet. The Ministry of Defence says it's aware of the video, but it's too soon to comment on the cause of the incident. Prince Charles has acknowledged the appalling atrocity of slavery in Barbados as the country became a republic. During a ceremony to mark the occasion, the Prince of Wales said this was now a new beginning for the nation. It's the first ever President Dame Sandra Mason. She's now replaced the Queen as head of state. Editor-in-chief of Majesty magazine, Ingrid Seward, says the decision to part ways wasn't unanimous.
If people want to break and make themselves free from the crown and have a president, which they have now, they have Sandra Mason, who is very, very popular. But the sad thing, I think, is it wasn't a vote by the people, it was a vote by the government. So the people of Barbados, they love the Queen. And it used to be called Little England. The island is very English in its way. But it wasn't a referendum like we had here. It was a decision by the government.
You're up to date. I'll have your headlines in half an hour. Right now, back to the point.
Good morning, you're watching To The Point on GB News with me, Mercy Moroki and Patrick Christie's, and we're here until midday with you, bringing you the latest. So here's what's coming up.
Yes, well, masks are back. Face coverings are now mandatory on public transport and in shops. What do you make of it? Is it much ado about nothing, or is it a proportionate response? Keep sending in those views.
Yes, and the UK and France are due to resume talks on tackling the Channel crossing crisis. It comes as Paris backtracks on its refusal to negotiate. Well, is this the breakthrough we've been waiting for? We'll discuss.
And Barbados has become a republic in a ceremony attended by Prince Charles. So this means that the Queen will no longer be as head of state. Could other countries soon follow suit? We'll be speaking with a royal commentator about what all of this means.
Yes, we have all of that coming up and much more across the programme. And get in touch with your views as usual. We'd love to hear them. gbviews@gbnews.uk, the email there on the screen, and we'll be getting to those throughout the programme. But first, Patrick gives his views on an Albanian human trafficker set to be deported from Britain for the third time.
A convicted human trafficker is being deported from the UK for a third time in less than 2 years. Let that sink in. A convicted human trafficker is being deported from the UK for the third time in less than 2 years. So a man who trades in people's lives, which is probably the worst kind of human being there is, has managed to come to Britain, be kicked out, come back to Britain to be kicked out, and then come back again. Does anyone want to take a bet with me about how long it'll be before he's back once more? A few weeks? But as if his current job as a human trafficker wasn't bad enough, it does actually get a lot worse. Albanian Hazir Lala has a criminal record as long as your arm. In April 2016, he was convicted of multiple driving offences and the possession of false ID documents. He was disqualified from driving for 15 months and jailed for 6. He was arrested again in the UK on the 4th of September 2019 for organised immigration crime offences committed in Belgium. He was extradited to Belgium in early 2020, where he was convicted of human trafficking and participating in a criminal organisation. Lala was given a 5-year prison sentence, which was partially suspended. He was also ordered to pay a fine of €102,000, which presumably he had no trouble doing. He was arrested again under the Immigration Act on the 20th of February last year for overstaying. Then another deportation order was signed on the 7th of April 2020, and he was removed and sent back to Albania on the 19th of August 2020. We are, as a nation, well and truly there for the taking, aren't we? This guy has made a mockery of our border security. In fact, he's made a living recently out of exploiting how pathetic our border security is. Hazir Lala is the prime example of the fact that we urgently need to up our game when it comes to our borders. It's the epitome of the national security argument, isn't it? By definition, it's very hard to calculate exactly how many illegal immigrants there are in the UK, but estimates put it at between 800,000 and 1.5 million. How many of these people have a criminal past like Hazir Lala? How many of these people work in illegal industries? How many of these people, would you argue, are good for Britain? And this is also why language is so important. Classing every single person who comes over the channel as an asylum seeker, for example, is both factually incorrect and also actively damaging, because it shuts down debate about whether or not some of these people may have the potential to pose a threat to our national security. Classing every single illegal immigrant as some kind of refugee fleeing war is, again, factually incorrect and shuts down a very necessary discussion on our national security. These arguments are all too often put forward by people living in well-to-do areas like Kingston-upon-Thames, who, frankly, would never bump into someone like Hazir Lala, let alone have to live next door to him. The time will come when we have so many of these people in this country that it does eventually start to affect the lives of the very privileged. And that's when, finally, we'll see some action on this. But I don't want to wait until then. There will be thousands of Hazir Lalas in Britain right now. We don't need any more. We need to toughen up and tighten our borders immediately. If we don't do that, then it's nothing short of a massive act of national self-harm. Yes, I mean, this is just the
it is. I don't even know what to say about it because it's so ridiculous. Yeah. But I think it's equally important for the immigration debate. You mentioned there it's important to not assume or to not pretend everybody who's coming over is necessarily an asylum seeker. And I suppose that the benchmark for that is looking at the proportion of people who go through the system and are eventually granted asylum. And we know that, of course, that's not 100%. But I think it's also equally important to, be level-headed about all of this, because the majority of people do get their asylum cases accepted and they are granted asylum in this country. So it's a high proportion. And I think the most important thing in all of this is just keeping a level head, because we talk a lot about, don't we, about the potential of language and the potential of discourse around this issue to flare up racial tensions, and also a lot of it disadvantages people who are actually genuine asylum seekers. And so obviously this man is, a horrid individual.
That absolutely, unequivocally, the vast majority of these people pose no threat to this country whatsoever or anyone in it. That is plain to see, right? But what I am saying is we have a discussion about the fact that we currently do have a system that at least allows the potential, right, for someone potentially who does wish to cause us harm to come in and do that. And it is a bit of an open goal at the minute. And clearly, look, if you are able to be deported from a country and make it back again and continue to operate an actual human trafficking ring from Walthamstow, maybe, just maybe, that tight.
Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely agree with you on that one. Well, keep your views coming into us, GBviews at gbnews.uk. We're also running a Twitter poll today on restrictions that have come into force today, which we'll be discussing shortly, and asking whether...
results, if you want.
Yeah, we can show the results at the moment. We've had over 6,000 votes on our Twitter poll so far on whether you'll be following the restrictions.
Yes, well, I've got them here. 68.4% of you saying no, as it stands. So there we go.
Well, that doesn't... I have to say, that doesn't chime with what I saw on the train this morning, which was almost 98% compliance, I would say, including myself, I would have to say. For a very long time, I haven't worn them, but I did wear one today.
I forgot. Yeah. All adults in the UK will be offered a COVID booster jab to help stop another wave of infections driven by the new variant Omicron. So early evidence suggests that the Omicron variant has a higher reinfection risk, but scientists say it will take about 3 weeks before it's known how the variant actually impacts the vaccine effectiveness.
Yes, well, until then, England's Deputy Chief Medical Officer, Professor Jonathan Van Tam, says vaccine boosting is the thing we can do most easily whilst we wait for the science mist to clear. Meanwhile, the government has introduced new self-isolation rules and has made face coverings, as we were saying there, mandatory for visiting shops and using public transport. Those rules came into force in England this morning at 4 a.m.
They did indeed. Well, MPs will vote on the new COVID restrictions later on as measures to combat the Omicron variant are enforced across England. Well, our GB News political editor and presenter, an all-round good egg, Darren McCaffrey, is with us in the studio.
Good morning. Can I just start with a little bit of news that's just come in?
Oh, please.
Which I think potentially is quite significant. We'll have to see how it plays out. So we've just heard in the last kind of 30 minutes or so from the Dutch authorities in the Netherlands, obviously, saying that they have sequenced actually 2 of the positive tests for Omicron, actually not from those people who came in from South Africa in the last couple of days, but actually from a whole week before that, from the 19th and the 23rd of November, which is giving this impression. We've also heard today from, he's one of the board members of Pfizer, saying it is entirely possible, actually, that this variant may have been circulating not just for weeks, but for a couple of months. Now, the reason I say that's significant is that we have seen a big spike, haven't we, in cases in the Netherlands? Remember, they went into essentially a lockdown from 5 p.m. to 5 a.m. every day, which would build into the fact that it's more transmissible. But the optimistic note may well be that actually this variant's been circulating far more than we ever thought before, and actually it's not necessarily changed the entire roadmap of where we thought the virus was going. So, as always with these things, quite difficult to judge. We don't know. We'll have to listen to what the experts say. But I just think it is notable that actually there is starting to emerge evidence this morning that potentially this variant may well be in Europe, at least, for a lot longer than we originally thought.
Yeah. And so, given that, I mean, as you say, we don't know for sure anything yet. We're still in the process of trying to determine all of those things. But in terms of proportionality, what the restrictions the government brought in at 4 a.m. this morning for England, face masks in public transport, face masks in shops, are those proportionate? Because some people have been saying, well, what about pubs? What about hospitality? What about big crowded events if they're not being brought in there where more people will be crowded? What's that all about?
So I think in terms of proportionality, there's always going to be a debate about that. The government clearly think that they need to be cautious with all of this. And I think for some, actually, probably for the majority of the public who think that the government were not cautious enough back in March of last year, or indeed this time last year, that actually this may well be the right response. So remember, this is essentially actually only putting England into line with what's already in place in Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland. In terms of take-up, I mean, it is fascinating. I mean, again, this is purely anecdotal, but on my train journey in this morning, which I take every single day, I've gone from 40% last week to 90% today. There are, of course, concerns that, we're overreacting to this, and there'll be Conservative MPs when the debate takes place later on today who feel that the government are overreacting and want to know when this potentially could come to an end. I think, in theory, under the legislation, the mandatory mask wearing is due to, the sunset clause is due to come to an end on the 21st of December, so the government would then have to seek permission to extend it again. But frankly, the government, and they have been very open about this, they're doing this because they just don't know. It is the bottom line. And in terms of the settings, I think the thought process is that when you're in a shop and on a train, you are more likely to move around. You're all more likely to be sat next to the person for a longer period of time. And also, of course, when you're in bars and restaurants, invariably you're there to eat and drink.
Yes.
That means you cannot wear a mask. It's like this thing when you get on a flight and say that, please do remember, if the oxygen masks do lower,
But bars and clubs, I mean, come on, bars and clubs surely would have to be the first.
Yeah, I mean, and then also, it's about a compromise, isn't it, I think, and it's always about that compromise. If you start introducing masks into, I think, particularly somewhere like nightclubs, people aren't going to go.
No.
Whereas it's probably less of an imposition in things like taxis, trains, and
I was at the don't like to go on about it, but presented an award at the British Curry Awards last night. Yes, best curry.
Not invited. It must be said.
Best curry in Scotland. Best curry in Scotland, and it was funny. I mean, it was a massive event, room full of people. Look, it's got to be probably a couple of thousand maybe. No one wearing a mask at all. But then, as of 4 a.m, of course, in the morning, they would have all had to have put masks on if they were on public transport, etc.
Precisely. As always, it's trying to strike a balance with these things. We just have to wait and see. As I say, we're going to have this debate this afternoon.
Yes.
And then there's going to be a Downing Street press conference later. A lot of emphasis on kind of booster vaccines. The government, of course, extending that for all 18-year-olds for the booster jab and lowering that age range from 6 to 3 months.
Good stuff, Darren.
Yeah, Darren, thank you. And we'll be back with more after this short break.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. It's much milder out there today compared to yesterday. It's a fairly grey day for most, with a bit of rain across the northwest, and we'll all get some heavy rain and gusty winds overnight tonight. The isobar's fairly close together today. It is fairly breezy, and there's a tangle of weather fronts covering Scotland, and this one in particular later will bring some heavier rain to Northern Ireland and western Scotland. The rain fairly light and patchy through much of the afternoon, but also affecting northwest England, drizzly at times across eastern England. Apart from the odd spot of drizzle over the hills, much of the south dry, but it is predominantly cloudy. A bit of brightness poking through at times. We'll see temperatures up to maybe 13 Celsius. Generally double digits, so much milder than yesterday. But turning wetter through this afternoon for Northern Ireland, western Scotland. This band of heavy rain will then swing its way across England and Wales through the evening and overnight, accompanied by some gusty winds. The winds will suddenly start to whip up, and it could get very windy on some of these North Sea coasts, particularly across the eastern side of England through this evening and during the early hours. It will turn colder into tomorrow, but temperatures mostly holding up in mid-single figures tonight. A brighter day for many tomorrow, but there will be showers, lots of showers coming in across Wales, Northern Ireland, and down the eastern side. Could be quite a wet and still very windy day here. Elsewhere, I say just 1 or 2 showers, a bit more in the way of sunshine compared to today, but a colder feel with temperatures back in single figures, and add on that wind, it will feel even colder. Quite a chilly wind blowing through Wednesday. The showers mostly of rain, but increasingly turning to snow across northern Scotland during Wednesday evening, and just the threat of a bit more snow pushing south during Wednesday night and into Thursday morning. So chance it could be a bit icy on Thursday morning. There could be some snow around. Overall Thursday, though, looking like a dry and a bright day for many, with plenty of wintry sunshine. Bye for now.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinions. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK, the world, and our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We're here for you. Don't forget to join our community by hitting the subscribe button.
And download the GB News app so you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
Yes, morning all. Now, new research suggests that asylum seekers who are victims of sexual violence face further abuse and trauma as a result of the UK asylum process and are let down by authorities. Reasons include gender-insensitive and inhumane asylum interviews, sexual harassment in unstable asylum accommodation, and a lack of access to health and psychology services.
Yes, well, the study calls on the Home Office to integrate gender and trauma sensitivity in the asylum system. And Victoria Canning, who is Senior Lecturer in Criminology at the University of Bristol, has spent over a decade working on the rights of women seeking asylum. And she spoke earlier on GB News and was asked about some of the key issues those seeking asylum have faced.
And that also goes back to long-term, over the last decade at least, cuts to support services for domestic, interpersonal and sexualised violence. The other is the impacts of the asylum system itself. So like the research which has just been released from the University of Birmingham, my research has evidenced that the actual asylum system itself has many processes which itself inflicts quite a lot of psychological and emotional harms. So this includes completely avoidable processes such as dispersal. If you are dispersed at very short notice, actually being able to get access to support for sexual violence or torture is reduced. Asylum accommodation, as the report has found, is lacking in terms of security and support for women. I have met with women and interviewed with women that have experienced harassment from people working on site, for example, being offered what is a form of sexual violence, which is doing something in the house in receipt of sexual favours, which is completely against against any law. Is against the law when women are in vulnerable positions. And the asylum system itself, as the report finds, highlights that actually the whole interview process for survivors. Imagine being a survivor of torture or sexual violence and being expected to outline your experiences of abuses to somebody that you don't know without building any kind of trust or trusting relationship. It's fundamentally against all principles of support services that I've ever worked with. And I've interviewed more than 100 psychologists, psychotraumatologists, and effectively all of the processes which are undertaken by the Home Office are in contravention of what would be recognised as good practice. in any of these services. So in terms of who is listening, those who are already struggling to provide support are listening. So quite often organisations who are already themselves impacted by cuts to staff, they can hear what we're saying. Who isn't listening is the Home Office. There are very feasible, as this study at the University of Birmingham also shows, and as many organisations have shown over the whole period of my my working career, there are very feasible, easy to access changes that can be made within the Home Office. That can also be made in terms of how support is provided and where those funds should go. And instead, in the aftermath, particularly in the aftermath of those austerity, which is one thing that I can certainly say, is that provision is reduced, and those who do listen to us are the ones who are most stretched on the ground and who are really doing their best to provide services to women survivors. So in a sense, there is an echo chamber, and that really needs to shift at a structural level with the Home Office and institutionally as well.
Well, that was Victoria Cannon, Senior Lecturer in Criminology at the University of Bristol, talking about this new report, this new research about some of the abuses that asylum seekers are facing, particularly women.
Yeah, I'll say I think there's a couple of red flags there, aren't there? I mean, OK, if indeed some of those cases are, as she alluded to there, from staff that are working at some of these sites and everything, then OK. But I mean, it does appear, doesn't it, that lots of this abuse is happening with other people that are in those accommodations with them, or indeed maybe making the crossings with them. And I would have thought that would be quite a significant red flag when it came to their asylum claims, but.
Yes, indeed. But given the high rate relatively high of applications that are granted, I think to not help them at this point would only cause further problems down the line. Given that most of them do actually end up staying in the country, the women that is. But after the break, Barbados becomes a republic. But what did Prince Charles have to say about it? We look into the Prince's trip to the Caribbean and the future of the British Empire. That's after this morning's news with Rosie.
Good morning, I'm Rosie Wright. Here are the latest headlines. MPs will vote on new COVID restrictions later as measures to combat the Omicron variant are enforced in England. Face coverings are now compulsory in shops and on public transport, and all UK arrivals now have to self-isolate until they receive a negative PCR result. 9 cases of the new variant have now been identified in Scotland, bringing the UK total to at least 14. Retailers are making a shocking profit on petrol. That's according to the RAC. The motoring body says fuel is around 12 pence a litre too expensive, and it estimates that 19 pence profit is being made on every litre. That's 3 times more than before the pandemic. France is proposing what it describes as a balanced agreement between the UK and the EU to tackle the migrant crisis. The French government says it's sending a letter to Boris Johnson, and if it's received well, then talks can resume quickly. Footage has emerged which appears to show the moment a British F-35 stealth jet crashed into the Mediterranean. The incident happened earlier this month on the UK's flagship carrier HMS Queen Elizabeth. The Ministry of Defence says it's too soon to comment on the cause. Prince Charles has acknowledged the appalling atrocity of slavery in Barbados during a ceremony marking its transition to a republic. The nation's first ever president, Dame Sandra Mason, has now replaced the Queen as head of state. You're right up to date here on GB News. I'll be back with more on today's stories at 12 o'clock.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Yes, hello everybody, welcome back. And we're going to go straight into my inbox, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Loads of you have been getting in touch, Craig being one of them. The fact is, it's just as easy for someone who wants to cause us harm as a genuine refugee to get into the UK. Craig says that's a fact. That scares me and undermines the whole system. I don't think national security is being taken seriously enough, and I'm sick of debate and discussion being shut down. Craig, man after my own heart. Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah, I think it's difficult, isn't it? Because it's a bit of an art rather than a science. You're just relying on what they're kind of telling you. You're relying on them to tell you the truth, which, of course, by definition, if you're trying to get here illegally and you're not a genuine asylum seeker, of course you're going to lie your way throughout the whole thing. So it's a difficult one, isn't it? Some people will always fall through the cracks, even if our system was as good as it could be.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is, in case you are just joining us, the story that we've highlighted quite a lot so far in this show, which is this human trafficker, Albanian chap, who has been deported now for the third time in less than 2 years. He's living in Walthamstow and trading in human lives. So, yeah, sounds like the kind of guy you don't want in Britain, it's fair to say. But it's highlighted, hasn't it, some issues with our border security and national security, I suppose. And so that's what we've been discussing there. But another big topic for us today has, of course, been the reintroduction of some restrictions, mandatory face coverings, etc. on public transport and in shops. And a lot of you have been getting in touch about that. Dale is on. He says, shops and public transport are places some people have to use, so it should be safer than a pub or a club. That people can avoid if worried about health. I'm normally a non-wearer, but I will comply with these rules.
That I think was in a response to, we were speaking to our political editor Darren McCaffrey earlier, and I just raised that places like clubs or large events where people are congregated very tightly together, masks aren't being brought in for those. And I think what Dale is saying there is, well, you don't have to attend a large event or a sporting event or whatever it is, but you do obviously have to go to the shop, buy groceries and use public transport.
Yes, of course. Well, look, again, what do you think about this? Will you be wearing your mask? Or will you be taking the potential £6,500 fine that apparently comes eventually if you relentlessly do not wear a mask? And where do you stand on all of this? It is an interesting one, really, because part of me can understand, obviously, the idea that we would want to essentially not have another lockdown and not have surging COVID cases. But then I can't help but focus on the idea now that, as it stands, we don't know much about Omicron. What we are being told from from a lot of the medical and scientific community is that it doesn't necessarily appear to be any more dangerous than other variants, so we'll have to wait and see about that one. And also, I can't help but notice that Boris Johnson does tend to go maskless in theatres quite a lot, and especially while he's drinking wine with his chums. And it does make me question how seriously is the government actually taking Omicron. But maybe I'm barking up the wrong tree.
Yes, well, let's just hope they won't last. These restrictions won't last a minute longer than they need to, because I'm not sure many people will put up with restrictions across Christmas like we had last winter.
No, indeed, absolutely. And yes, I'm just going to go to another couple. How can we stop people coming through our ports when Border Force officers are going out in boats to escort illegal immigrants back over to Britain? That's from David. And, look, it's a tricky one, isn't it? Especially with that, because Priti Patel had ordered them to start turning boats round, and it turned out that they weren't doing that and they didn't want to do that, and they actually had a head of Border Force for quite a while who didn't believe in borders, which you would have thought would have come up at the job interview. But alas, no, here we are. So yes, it's a tricky one. And look, the flip side is we can't have a case we had last week, 27 migrants dying and drowning in the Channel or whatever.
Not.
We can't have that again.
Yes, indeed, and keep your views coming in to us, gbviews@gbnews.uk, and we'll return to those just before the end of the show. But for now, Prince Charles travelled to Barbados to attend a ceremony to mark its becoming of a republic, which came into effect at midnight time, local time, last night. During his appearance, he acknowledged the appalling atrocity of slavery in the Caribbean, saying it forever stains our history. The Prince described how the creation of this republic offers a new beginning as he watched the Queen's standard be lowered for the final time. And we're just showing you some images of that ceremony yesterday.
I'm quite surprised I'm quite surprised he turned up, really. I mean, I think they've kind of binned his mum off, haven't they?
Yeah, but I guess it's diplomatic. It's the diplomatic thing to do. And they do still, of course, want close relations, I'm sure, with the new republic. So it's right, I think, that he turned up.
Yes, you got rid of my mummy, I think was one of the things that you should have said there. But anyway, joining us now is, I find it weird how they all call them mummy. It's weird. And anyway, yeah, it is weird, thank you. Yes, anyway, the royal commentator, Richard Fitzwilliam, and staunch monarchist joins us now. Thank you very much. Look, what do you make of this? Is this a sign of a weakening, more streamlined royal family, or has this been a long time coming?
Well, I think you could argue it's certainly been a long time coming. If you look at the Commonwealth, 54 countries, 16 of them still have the Queen as head of state. And this in Barbados has been debated back as far as 1979 when the Cox Commission recommended that it should remain a monarchy. But in the 1990s, most particularly, and in fact subsequently, there were on several occasions, and there was actually a bill passed for a referendum on this. Significant, I think, that there wasn't one. This has been something broadly that it should. I think the palace will be relatively sanguine about it. Obviously, it's a matter for Barbados and the Barbados people, but equally it is significant. And you mentioned I was a monarchist, quite so. Well, it's interesting, isn't it, that the people didn't actually vote in it, because the three referenda that have been held in Commonwealth countries, in Australia, Tuvalu and St Vincent and the Grenadines, all of them, the vote was to keep the monarch. But equally here, it isn't a big surprise, because this has been part and parcel of Barbados politics for quite some time. And Dame Sandra Mason, the Governor-General, is now the president, and Mia Mottley, who's Barbados Labour Party. I mean, this was their policy, and there is hardly an opposition senator or member of the House of Assembly. They're almost entire clean sweep. So from the point of view of getting it through, that wasn't a problem. But I do think there should have been a referendum of the people.
Yes, I mean, I believe the government that was voted into power did sort of stand on a platform that to do that. So some might argue that, well, people knew what they were voting for. But I want to ask you about the practicalities or the actual implications of having versus not having the Queen as a head of state. There's just over 50 countries still in the Commonwealth. What benefits do countries actually accrue in practice from having the Queen as the head of state? Or is it just more a symbolic thing?
Well, of course, a constitutional monarchy, the Queen is above politics, so symbolically it's very important, and the Queen becomes a symbol of national unity, as she is here. So far as the Commonwealth countries that have kept the Queen, and Barbados is the third country in the Commonwealth, following Malta and Mauritius in 1992, which became independent as monarchies and then have subsequently become a republic. Obviously, this is, I mean, it's linked to several things. Firstly, I think BLM movements influenced it. Secondly, very possibly the British government's lamentable handling of the Windrush scandal may have influenced it. And thirdly, as I mentioned, I mean, it has been part and parcel of the politics of Barbados, as it is of neighbouring Jamaica, for many years. So it isn't an entirely surprising development. The likes of Cigarfield Sobers, the great cricketer, was against it, but Sir Sridath Rampal, the former Secretary-General of the Commonwealth, thinks that the Queen won't be particularly fussed about this, because obviously Barbados will still be a member of the Commonwealth, and as the Prince of Wales has stressed in a speech which has acknowledged the abominable atrocities of slavery in past years, the relations between Barbados and Britain will remain close. But it is important also to remember the tremendous investment China has put into Barbados and into the Caribbean. And this too may well have played a part in the decision.
This is it. Is it actually bad politics from us? Is it bad diplomacy? Because, you know, China is ready and willing. If you look at, you know, the map of Africa, there was talk, wasn't there, for quite a while of, I think it was in Wales, they wanted to show the map of Africa with the flags of every nation that's colonised Africa, right? And obviously the British flag would have featured relatively prominently on that. But no, it would just be the Chinese flag, wouldn't it, essentially, pretty much everywhere. Is this another example of that? You know, are we about to see China now get involved in a big way in the Caribbean?
Well, what we've seen is that Chinese investment in many Commonwealth countries is extraordinarily significant and, of course, far exceeds Britain in some. So, yes, I think that it's becoming a major player in the Caribbean and elsewhere. I mean, this is part and parcel of Chinese expansionism with their investment, and they seem to be handling it in a way which is causing their influence to spread. And there are those who think that this was one of the main reasons behind the decision for the Barbados finally to go for a republic. As I say, it has been a debating point for a long time. To do so now, and to make absolutely certain, of course, as I say again, the people were not specifically consulted in a referendum. There was actually a bill in 2005 which was for a referendum on this issue. So no real surprise. Obviously, close relations will continue, as the Prince of Wales has stressed in what I think is quite an important appearance symbolically.
Just while I've got you, if that's all right, in your capacity as a royal commentator, royal expert, the BBC obviously has copped it a little bit with princes in the press. What have you made of this? Because, you know, there were some revelations, I suppose you could say, couldn't you, about, you know, the influence that Meghan has had in the media and some of their ambitions, and, for example, things like Harry overshadowing Prince Charles's 2016 royal tour, and all of these things come out of the documentary. What have you made of it as a whole, and what were some of the standout elements of of those documentaries for you?
The standout element of the documentary for me was the fact that, on the whole, although you could clearly, if you're interested in royal matters, there would be intricacies that fascinated you, and various top commentators. It was very interesting to see the likes of Valentine Lowe, Camilla Tominey, Richard Palmer, and others. This is for those who are particularly interested in, obviously, in this topic. But for the average viewer, I think there was remarkably little that was new. What I do think has been emphasised, and as you know, that legally this is very, very sensitive. The three palaces, Buckingham Palace, Clarence House, and Kensington Palace, put out a statement, and that statement made it abundantly clear that, in their opinion, material was used which had not been verified. The programme claimed that they'd given them an opportunity to send a representative and comment. So this is, as I say, a very sensitive legal area. What I made of it was certainly in the second episode, no one was questioning, for example, as they were some of the reporters on what they'd written, there were no questions whatsoever on some of the outrageous claims that Harry and Meghan made on Oprah. And I think that it would have been very interesting had Omid Scobie, who serves as a sort of unofficial spokesperson for the Sussexes, had been asked more about finding freedom and why it had originally been denied that Meghan had cooperated with it, which we know she had.
Well, exactly. Sorry to cut you off. It's fascinating stuff, but we're just a bit up against it. Just quickly on that Omid Scobie stuff. I mean, it is questionable if we're dealing with a chap here who appears sometimes to misremember his own age. It does maybe cast doubt over the calibre of everything else that he has to say. But anyway, Richard, thank you very, very much. Richard Fitzwilliams there royal reporter, royal correspondent, royal expert, and all-round nice guy as well. Well, let's move on from that.
Yes, a bit of good news to end, a good news story, uplifting story to end the show today. If you cast your minds back to 2011, when Tom Pellereau became Lord Alan Sugar's first business partner to receive the now infamous $250,000 investment on the UK's version of Apprentice. Well, fast forward to today, Tom Pellereau's business Style Ideas has made over £5 million revenue worldwide, and his first product, the uniquely curved S-File, has been sold over 2 million times.
Well, there we go. The business niche is in innovative health and beauty inventions to aid the small frustrations within everyday life. The inventor is now a powerful force in the beauty industry, and we're very happy to say that joining us now is the man himself. Tom Pellereau, thank you very, very much for joining us. I can remember watching you win. I was sat in my mum and dad's front room, The Apprentice. You won The Apprentice when The Apprentice was big as well, didn't you? So you're actually a proper one. So well done.
It was huge. It was huge. I think 10.5 million people watched the final episode, and it absolutely changed my life for the better. I can't thank the BBC, Lord Sugar, and the public, everyone out there like yourselves who's originally bought maybe one of my curved nail files. Which sort of follows that natural shape, and then the baby nipper clipper, and as you showed, this Style Pro, which is
all right, mate,
this
it's not
product
QVC,
is completely
right? Okay.
Yeah, I know.
But I was always wondering, because I think your one, obviously you had to present your business plan, didn't you? And what became immediately obvious to me was that most people didn't appear to have a business plan, right? Whereas you obviously did, and that was great. But a lot of people seemed to be, they were great contestants, they were good in the business world, good entrepreneurs, quite sparky. But actually, the point was that Lord Sugar had to invest in something, and it looks like a lot of people didn't have that much to invest in. Was your business plan a proper one? Did you go in there with that, or were you scrambling around at the last minute?
So it was the first series where it was a business plan rather than a job. And I think that slightly took some people by surprise, that they thought they were applying for that rather than this. And also it was quite fluid and you couldn't change things. For example, in my business plan, I didn't realise till the day before that I'd done the thing with Excel where I'd forgotten to sort of drag the formula across. And so all my numbers were completely incorrect. And I didn't realise, I realised this the day before, and the following day I met Claude, and unfortunately it wouldn't allow me to change the numbers. So I went into a meeting with Claude, one of the most difficult people to impress, in that show, knowing that my numbers were all correct. And he immediately picked up on that and then, destroyed me for 20 minutes because of it. Yeah, it was. I've been, the business for people that have followed as well from The Apprentice has been incredible. I speak regularly to Ricky and Mark and Leah and others. It's been a really huge success, the program.
Yeah, and the fashion and beauty industry has exploded, I would say, since you were on The Apprentice. I mean, I as a woman, I know it's completely oversaturated with so many products. How have you found it, and creating and innovating and trying to match all the beauty demands that we seem to have these days since you won?
It is a very, very tricky. So. We launched this beauty fridge on the 23rd of March, the night that Boris Johnson locked us down. And I remember being with my sales director. We'd spent ages developing this exclusively for ASOS at the time. It's now available in Argos and others. But we were like, what have we done? Everyone's locked down. Everyone's really concerned about their jobs. Nobody's going to be buying, a beauty fridge. But lo and behold, they did, and it continues and it continues. It's one of our best sellers at the moment, and this is because of that trend away from preservative-based makeups. And so there's much more people who want preservative-free or additives-free, and you need to chill those, including you also need to chill your nail polish and such in a fridge sort of like this. So, following those trends, following the changing demand, and we're currently working incredibly hard to ensure that everything is recycled plastic and hopefully biodegradable plastic in the future. So our latest makeup sponge cleaner, this is 100% recycled plastic bottle and cap. It's also recyclable, so it can go round in that circle twice. And our aim is for next Christmas that all our products are fully made of recycled plastic, because it's so important. I've got young kids. That's all they're interested in. And other products we've done with Tesco, recyclable, reusable cloths and things.
Tom, absolutely hats off to you for the whole thing, frankly, having the bottle to go on The Apprentice, then winning the thing, and then, actually, making a real success out of it and having a go and trying to change the game, and also managing to fit in more advertisements for your own products than I've ever seen anyone ever do on television. Well done, you. So fantastic stuff. I'm all for a bit of that. Tom Pellerin there,
Thank you very much, sir.
CEO. And yes, there we go. Well, there we are.
Never heard of a beauty fridge, actually. So that is
you see?
Something new.
Yeah, exactly. No, look, I quite like the guy. The guy has a go, doesn't he? Bless him. Anyway, right. So let's dip in one last time for the final word for you, the viewers. Funny how masks are brought in for places government officials don't usually go to. That's from Ron. Exactly. Well, we do have a little bit of news actually to bring you, and I'm just getting this through literally on my phone now, so forgive me. But this is it, which is that it does look as though actually some medical professionals in this country, such as Dr. Jenny Harries, Chief Executive of the UK Health Security Agency, has actually basically said that we should start limiting our social contact with people. That's the quote, that's the comment, which is that we should be now considering limiting our social interaction with people. So, some people might say, well, the mask thing is absolutely fine, and I get that, but also some people were saying it was a bit of a slippery slope, and we're less than 12 hours, is it now, into the new rules? And people are already advising us potentially to limit our social contact.
Yeah, she said they're being careful, not socialising when we don't particularly need to, and particularly go in and getting those booster jabs. That's the advice she's given. Yeah. And also we've been asking on Twitter about whether you'll follow COVID rules. They've obviously come in from 4 a.m. this morning, new rules about wearing masks in shops and on public transport. 32% of you, so a third of you say you will be following those, and 2/3 obviously say you won't be following those. So interesting split there.
Yeah. Also, it is going to be interesting that we're not calling anyone a liar or anything like that. But look, you can imagine, and I can imagine as well, someone walks up to you and goes, right, so that's £500 fine. I wonder how many people do just put their mask on. But, there we go. GB Views at gbnews.uk. Great to give you all the final say. And thank you, everyone, for getting involved with the show, for emailing in and taking part in that poll.
Yes, and that is it here from us today, but we'll be back tomorrow. But for now, don't go away, because up next is the briefing with Gloria De Piero. And before that, we'll also be giving you the weather. So join us tomorrow at 9:30 to midday. What are you laughing at?
The fact that you've got about 10 more seconds to fill.
And you've just helped me fill the last 5, so goodbye.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. It's much milder out there today compared to yesterday. It's a fairly grey day for most, with a bit of rain across the northwest, and we'll all get some heavy rain and gusty winds overnight tonight. The isobar's fairly close together today. It is fairly breezy, and there's a tangle of weather fronts covering Scotland, and this one in particular later will bring some heavier rain to Northern Ireland and western Scotland. The rain fairly light and patchy through much of the afternoon, but also affecting northwest England, drizzly at times across eastern England. Apart from the odd spot of drizzle over the hills, much of the south dry, but it is predominantly cloudy. A bit of brightness poking through at times. We'll see temperatures up to maybe 13 Celsius. Generally double digits, so much milder than yesterday. But turning wetter through this afternoon for Northern Ireland, western Scotland. This band of heavy rain will then swing its way across England and Wales through the evening and overnight, accompanied by some gusty winds. The winds will suddenly start to whip up, and it could get very windy on some of these North Sea coasts, particularly across the eastern side of England through this evening and during the early hours. It will turn colder into tomorrow, but temperatures mostly holding up in mid-single figures tonight. A brighter day for many tomorrow, but there will be showers, lots of showers coming in across Wales, Northern Ireland, and down the eastern side. It could be quite a wet and still very windy day here. Elsewhere, I say just 1 or 2 showers, a bit more in the way of sunshine compared to today, but a colder feel with temperatures back in single figures, and add on that wind, it will feel even colder. Quite a chilly wind blowing through Wednesday. The showers mostly of rain, but increasingly turning to snow across northern Scotland during Wednesday evening, and just the threat of a bit more snow pushing south during Wednesday night and into Thursday morning. So chance it could be a bit icy on Thursday morning. There could be some snow around. Overall Thursday, though, looking like a dry and a bright day for many, with plenty of wintry sunshine. Bye for now.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is